I am currently drinking probably the strongest mojito that I've ever made. So this may be an interesting video. Today, I'm gonna be talking about possibly the most fucking insane book that I've read to date this year. This is a little something that I kind of just stumbled upon on Goodreads, and now that I've read the whole thing, I binge read this in like 2 days. I think this may be the actual creepiest book that I've ever read in my entire life. I've never before had the sensation of feeling like a book that I'm reading is haunted. Even as I'm talking about it now, I'm kind of like the hairs on the back of my neck are bristling a little bit, because that is the pervasive feeling that I was having for the entirety of the time that I was reading this book. It wasn't the same thing as reading like a fictional horror. Like, I have read some pretty fucked up horror within the past couple of years. I mean, I read The Sluts by Dennis Cooper, which is extremely gory and graphic and has that kind of like, you know, internet chat room, dark web kind of thing going on. And then I read Tender is the Flesh, which is like meat processing plants and that kind of stuff. Both of those are creepy in like a way that like I specifically find very, very creepy and disturbing, and they genuinely upset me for the period of time that I was reading them, and in Tender of the Flesh's case, continued to upset me after I read it, as you know if you've watched my video on it. This book was really, really different because this is actually not a fiction book that I'm about to tell you about. The book in question is called The Story of Mary MacLane, as told by herself, but the actual title that Miss MacLane wanted to give to this book that she wrote was I Await the Devil's Coming. You'll, I guess, find out in this video why she titled it that. This book was published in 1902, and it was written by 19-year-old Mary MacLane. She, I think, originally was from Canada, and then her family moved down to Montana for this or that reason, and they were very, very isolated up there, and she dedicated herself to writing because she really, really wanted to become a literary celebrity. And she wrote this book that was basically a compilation of the sort of the mundane daily happenings of her life, and it sold 100,000 copies. It was on the radar of Ernest Hemingway and Gertrude Stein, and they liked it. So she basically, with this, got what she wanted. And I think what has been so shocking and haunting to me about this is reading the personality and thoughts of this 19-year-old woman, barely a woman, young woman from 1902 rural Montana, and feeling not just like I was reading the thoughts of a modern day woman, but kind of feeling a little bit like I was reading an incel manifesto. The anger that is in this book, the anger, and specifically, for me, it's the expressions of apathy and her notion that she expresses throughout this entire book that she is the most special person in the world. She identifies herself as a genius. Like, she says this, I think, on the first page of it. Literal first page. I am a genius. I am a philosopher of my own good peripatetic school. I care neither for right nor wrong. My conscience is nil. My brain is a conglomeration of aggressive versatility. I have reached a truly wonderful state of miserable, morbid happiness. This reads like a fucking Joker manifesto. I shit you not. I was reading this and I was like, that people don't fucking change. People literally don't fucking change. What has really fucking just flabbergasted me about this is that, you know, in my research and in my reading, I do a lot of just reading of books by women that seem to be expressing discontent with their situation in the world, right? That seem to be doing that. And then I read scholarship on those books that tells me, oh no, they wouldn't have thought about it like that. Like, all these things are normal to them. And like, I pick this up, and this is barely outside of the time period that I study and that I primarily read from. And there's this woman who is reacting to her incredibly stifling living situation kind of by going insane, and kind of how I feel like I would have reacted to that kind of situation. I would have lost my mind. And that is what has literally had the hair on the back of my neck standing up as I read this entire thing. Because holy shit, first of all, I was right that women back in ye olden days did not necessarily naturalize their oppression. There were women who were completely lucid and who understood what was happening to them and the fact that it was basically bullshit. Like, she seriously talks about the fact that she believes that there is no other person in the world like her. I mean, it's a woman who is reckoning with her own personhood in a world that denies her personhood. If you're a woman alive today, you have probably felt the same feeling or an iteration of the same feeling, right? Like, every woman has had that thought of like, am I smarter than all the other ones? Because you're getting messages all day, every day that women are just like dumb and like we only think about clothes and makeup, and because you have deep thoughts, you think that you must be the only one and that you must be different. And I think that men, to a degree, like, can experience something similar to this, which is why this was reminding me of like incel manifestos. And I think the reason that I thought incel manifesto rather than thinking about like women and like feminist issues and women's alienation is specifically because of how much she praises herself in this. Her narcissism, and I don't say that in like a derogatory way, her narcissism goes beyond what would be considered normal even today. And it's not like feminine preening narcissism. It's so interesting. Her praise for herself is not limited to her looks. It's a very bodily sort of praise, right? So she goes on and on about how strong and like kind of like fertile her female body is and how wonderful her actual form of her body is, but she doesn't think very highly of what her face looks like. She doesn't think she's like face pretty. And she also talks about like the strength of her spine. Like, she will describe bodily movements where she will like describe her spine straightening as she sits up. She talks about her liver and like the strength of her liver frequently. And she talks about how like superior her digestion is like to everybody else's. It's not just that she thinks she's intelligent, it's that her intelligence, she believes, extends to every single area of her life. So she goes on this ramble at one point about how she knows how to eat better than every other person in the world. She goes on to describe the meticulous act of her sitting down and eating and digesting a single olive. And she describes this process bite by tiny bite, and like how much she relishes in taking in food. Food is another thing that comes up frequently in this, and that I found so incredible to read about. So she really likes steak. She likes steak and green onions. She eats like a whole plate of brown sugar fudge every single morning, and that's the first thing that she eats when she wakes up. As she's going through and describing the like daily minutia of her life, she describes things in such fucking eerie detail. I kind of feel like I am seeing a kind of shade of somebody's life. Like, I feel like I can almost exactly see the scene that she's telling me about. So she will talk about the process of making the fudge in the morning, and then she'll tell me about the chair that she sits in by the window and what she's looking at as she's looking out the window. And all of this, like all of her descriptions of her daily life, are pervaded by this relentless feeling of boredom. She is so terminally, chronically bored with her life. It creeped me out because it was, I don't know, it was reminding me of a character that I'm writing for the current novel, and like, it was a bad kind of boredom that she was talking about here. It's when you combine that sense of boredom with a complete lack of sympathy and empathy and identification with all of the people around her. That, we know what happens when you get like that. Like, everyone has read like creepy comments on the internet, right? By men that are just like too deep in it. Like men where you have to worry that they're gonna fucking blow up a hospital. This reads like the thoughts of a man who is about to blow up a fucking hospital. Except it was written by a 19-year-old girl in 1902. And that's what's fucking revolutionary about it. It illustrates that these kinds of feelings are humanly universal. Everybody, throughout all stretches of history, had the potential for harboring these kinds of feelings. The misery combined with the self-worship and the self-obsession, and like the waiting to be saved. So this is the other thing, is she is so fucking lonely. It builds throughout the book, this loneliness, right? So in the beginning, we get a lot more of her self-centeredness and her talking about her strengths and why she's different from other people. And it's only as we get much farther along in the narrative that we start to hear about how other people are rejecting her. And she like describes this rejection extremely vaguely, which I just adored because it was so telling. You will describe your digestion in intimate detail, but you won't tell us the deets of what you mean when you say somebody placed a stone in your hand when you asked for bread. She mentions that there were 3 people involved, but I don't think we even know the genders of the people. I don't think that we have really any detail beyond that. We don't know if she said something or if they said something. And it reeks of insecurity, and that vulnerability is just fucking amazing to experience over 100 years later. Towards the end of the book, you start getting this sense of her isolation, and kind of throughout the book, you're getting smatterings of longings for romance. So she has a teacher crush on her female teacher, her school teacher. But later in the book, it becomes clear that she actually lost contact with this school teacher a long time ago. In the beginning, when she's talking about it, she uses like loves, like present tense, and kind of presumes the woman loves her back. And then later in the book, it just kind of silently switches over to her saying that the woman doesn't like her back. and doesn't respond to her letters. So that's crush number one. Crush number two, and this is where the title comes from, is the devil himself. Now, she actually prays to the devil and talks to him and speaks of him as if he manifests physically in her bedroom. She, like, imagines this extremely immoral, devilish, like, no good, down and dirty man is her manifestation of the devil. And she imagines him having, I think, like, cutting gray eyes. She has this fantasy of the devil coming and ruining her. Like, that's how she describes it. She literally fantasizes about the devil himself showing up and making her a fallen woman. And we all know what that means. She talks about wishing that he would kind of brutalize her. It's a little bit sadomasochistic the way that she describes it. And one of the lines that really stood out to me was her talking about how she wants it to hurt when she bears him children, and how she wants to be abandoned and have her reputation ruined by him. So she has this crush on the devil, and she basically wants all of this to happen because she wants the devil to break up the tedium of her life by ruining her fucking life. Presumably, I would add this context so that she never has to, like, get married or do any of that stuff with some boring man, just, you know, who doesn't have a personality and who frankly wouldn't fucking get her. And then her final crush is Napoleon. She has a collection of 19 framed pictures of Napoleon, and she goes on this, like, chapter-long rant about why she finds each of them attractive. She talks about, like, even finding the ugly characteristics of some of the portraits attractive. She talks about, like, how all of the portraits seem strong to her. Like, this is a thing that she really, really wants, is she wants a very strong man to show up, a man who she can't resist, who she has no hope of resisting, to just come and, well, fuck up her life, basically. It's actually one of the most spectacular pieces of history and of literature I think I have ever laid eyes on in my entire life. I think it's, like, just insane reading something from a woman from this time who was so utterly awake. That is what's fucking creepy. Like, she lived and died 100 years ago, but, like, she would have gotten along fine in today's world. She wouldn't have been scandalized by it even a teensy tiny bit. And I don't know, that has been seriously just fucking me up. Women lived through these times where they had no fucking human rights, and this confirms that they weren't asleep for it. It's actually fucking life-changing to read this. It is so unbelievably eerie and haunting, but also so goddamn life-giving to know that, like, this woman lived and thought like this, and this is how she lived her life. She was, like, kind of resentful and angry of everyone around her, and she like, was digging her heels in that she couldn't relate to everyone around her. And she shamelessly fantasized about the devil sexually brutalizing her. And she wrote and published all of this, and people fucking liked it. Ernest Hemingway read this and liked it. What in the absolute fuck? That's all I have for today. You have to read this. I am so happy that I read this. I'm gonna be thinking about it for a really, really, really long time. My only regret and my only complaint is that I dearly wish I'd gotten a copy that had, like, the actual title that she wanted on it, instead of a pretty dry story of Mary MacLane. Yeah, this is what she looked like. she really was very face pretty. I don't know what she was talking about. But she was, more than being face pretty, a fucking genius. And good God, I mean, there was some justice. She did get the literary fame that she wanted. So, you know, sometimes I guess things do work out for unconventional and weird and angry and self-centered and selfish women. Yeah, anyway, I had to drop in and tell y'all about that. It's actually unfucking real. May Mary MacLane rest in peace. I hope she's smooching the devil in hell right now. And yeah, that's it. Bye.